Welcome, I'm Martina, your trusty guide through the pages of Camp Half-Blood and beyond. Grab your camp shirts, ready your weapons, and let's embark on this epic adventure together. This is Delphi Dispatches. Welcome to the last episode covering the Lightning Thief. Also, the last episode before I move back home. After this episode, the podcast will be on a bit of a hiatus, since I'm moving back to my hometown in the beginning of September and move across the country in October to go to university. I'll keep you updated on Instagram, but don't worry, there will be more things happening on the Instagram page as well, since I decided to move all my cosplay content, which is not much but still interesting, to the Delphi Dispatches Instagram account. Partly because I'm too lazy to make a separate cosplay account, and partly because I wanted more things to happen on the Delphi Dispatches account. Delphi Dispatches. As you might have noticed, this episode is a bit later than usual, and also probably coming out on a Sunday instead of a Monday. This is due to me waiting for the D23 Expo to include any news we got from there and to release on Percy's birthday, August 18th. In general, there are many new interviews and pictures and stuff floating around the internet right now. I collected the most interesting and important facts for you, and let's get started with some upsetting news, or at least upsetting to a lot of people in the Percy Jackson fandom, which hasn't really got to do anything with Percy Jackson. It has to do with Deadpool 3, and that everyone is sad that Walker is not Kid Pool, or in any way, shape, or form in the movie. I guess spoiler alert, Walker is not in the movie. Yeah, and the thing I'm particularly mad about, and a lot of people online, that the reason they didn't cast him as Kid Pool or made a role as Teen Pool for him was because he went through puberty. And I have to say, I hate those people who try to make Walker feel bad about going through puberty. Puberty is shitty enough. Don't make him feel bad about it, or even more bad about it. And the same was when the teaser trailer was released and his voice is so deep. I just can't understand those people who just want to make Walker and anyone going through puberty and growing up feel bad. So I will contain my rage for the sake of the episode, but know that inside myself I am very much raging. But let's start with actual Percy Jackson related news. Let's start with San Diego Comic-Con. So there are a lot of news we got from San Diego Comic-Con. I just gathered a few, and these things came up during them talking and the Q&A part. They were talking about memories from set. Adam Copeland showed up as a surprise for everyone. They showed a blooper reel, and I want this blooper reel to be released somewhere. I need to see. We also got a Tyson casting announcement. More on that later. Walker confirmed that he has seen sketches of Grover in a dress, which in also some other interviews got confirmed that Arian is gonna be in a dress. So we fans got what we wanted. And also Virginia Cole, who's playing Sally, was also on the panel, and she had a little bag with her with a blue cookie on it. She is perfect. She's just perfect. I love her. Then the other event was the D23 Expo. There we learned that everyone is taking horse riding lessons for the chariot races and stuff, including Charlie, who, if you remember from the books, is not there at the chariot race. So it's either for the ending when he has to at least try to ride on a horse, or something different. We'll see. We also learned that the special effects for Tyson's eye is gonna be something new, so that the actor Daniel doesn't have to wear any dot on his face or prosthetics. So I'm very curious how that's gonna look. Some highlights from social media. We learned that Leah and Dior have had a say in what Annabeth's and Clarice's hair is gonna look like throughout the season 2. And apparently, the hairstyle Leah had at Comic-Con is one similar, or the one she will have at some point in season 2. My theory is it will be the one she gets on Cersei's Island, because it's more fashion forward, I would say, than practical, and I'm pretty sure Annabeth would be very practical in at camp. although I can see her sporting that in the cap armor as well. She looks good. There's also a picture going around on the internet of a clapperboard, I think that's what it's called, from the series, where you can make out the words Annabeth and NYC, which could mean that the opening of season 2 is Annabeth's POV, or like just Annabeth running away from monsters to find Percy in New York, or even like flashbacks to young Annabeth. But I'm not sure if young Annabeth went through New York. And here also in some fittings, Ariane talked about having fittings for dresses and having to learn how to run in a dress, which just, I'm so looking forward, and I'm so curious what kind of dress, if it's going to be like a big opulent wedding dress, a minimalistic wedding dress, an Indian wedding dress, or just a regular dress. I'm so looking forward to that part. Also, since the last episode released on the 13th of August, Dior had her birthday and she turned 18. I mentioned it a bit earlier, but yes, we got a teaser. It was released the day before the D23 panel. We got a little 46-second teaser trailer, which is impressive that they had already had some usable footage, even though they just started filming. Most of the teaser was scenes from season 1 with a voiceover from Walker, and man, his voice is deep, like I said, but it fits perfectly. Like, you can see how this kid has been already scarred by his life as a demigod. Yeah, and the voiceover is, "My name is Percy Jackson. I am a demigod. Monsters come at me, so do the gods. Last year I had to stop a war." After that, we switch to new footage. We see 2 white horses and shots of a blue chariot with a trident on it. Percy is gripping the reins, looking very determined and spurring on the horses. And then he says, "But that was just the beginning." At the end, we see the image of a tattered Camp Half-Blood flag on the shore and a stormy sea behind it. There's also some text saying Percy Jackson and the Olympians, new season based on the Sea of Monsters, in production now. I love that we got so much news, because the next news is like one of the things people are most excited about, which is casting news. I already mentioned we have a Tyson casting announcement. Tyson will be played by Daniel Damer, who is known for the Netflix movie The Half of It. I've not seen it yet, but I'm planning on seeing it this weekend. I've seen the trailer and it looks really cool. And I just can see it. That guy is huge. He's like a head and then half taller than Walker. So just perfect for Tyson. And I can just see he has like a really sweet expression, which fits perfectly, in my opinion, for Tyson. And the next casting announcement is actually a trio. Our favorite weird trio who run a taxi service, the Grey Sisters. Anger will be played by Sandra Bernard. I looked her up, and the project she worked on that stood out to me the most and was like perfect is she voiced a character in Hercules, the animated series. If anyone has watched it, it's amazing. She voiced Cassandra. Then Tempest will be played by Kristen Schaal, who is also not just an actor but a voice actor, and she's the voice of Mabel from Gravity Falls. I just love that. Those two I have not heard before, the names, but I've heard of the next one, who's playing Wasp, Margaret Cho. And yeah, she was in 30 Rock, and she's also a comedian, so she has some like comedy specials out. Apart from Percy Jackson, we also got some book news. To be specific, the new RRP book, Touch of Blood by Sajni Patel, is coming out. It's the second book of the Venom series, so the first one was a touch of Venom? No, a drop of Venom. And this one is going to be Persephone and Hades meets Indian lore. We got a cover reveal, and it will be published on the 25th of February 2025. So until then, I will talk a bit more about the story, and I will remind you when it's out. And also, I'm not sure if I will have published another episode until the new book, Wrath of the Triple Goddess, comes out, but I'm very much looking forward to that in September. And then the last news, also related to a book, but also awards. The Ignite Awards 2024 have still open public voting. It's open until the 31st of August, and the winners will be announced in November. And in the category Outstanding Middle Grade Book is nominated, drumroll please, The Sun and the Star by Mark Oshiro and Rick Riordan. And I don't know if I've talked how much I love this book, but I love this book, and if you have time, go vote for it. It's on the website of the Ignite Awards. Demigod Discussions. Now let's start into the last 3 chapters of the Lightning Thief that we have ahead of us. Chapter 20 to 22. Chapter 20 is called I Battle My Jerk Relative. A Coast Guard boat picked up the trio and brought them to shore. To not look too suspicious, Percy willed himself to get wet and gave his shoes to Grover to cover his goat feet. Percy and Annabeth realized the prophecy was right. You shall go west and face the god who has turned. But it wasn't Hades, it was Ares, who was waiting for them on the beach. Percy confronted the god of war about him stealing the bolt and helm and blaming it on Percy. But Ares revealed that he wasn't the one to steal them, since gods can take each other's symbols of power. He had a demigod steal it for him. Percy immediately suspected Clarice, but Ares wouldn't say who it was. Since Ares is only the god of war and not wisdom, he started into his whole villain monologue, explaining how Percy had to die in the underworld for the 3 brothers to blame each other and go to war. He also revealed that he was still holding on to Hades' helm of invisibility. It was hanging on the side of his motorcycle. As Percy started to question Ares' plan and asked him why he didn't just keep the bolt, the gods started to consider this. But after a strange moment of Ares seemingly listening to someone, his demeanor shifted back to wrathful god. Percy figured out what was going on and just confronted Ares with saying that he knew it wasn't his idea. Ares protested, but he let slip that he doesn't have dreams, which sparked a memory in Percy's head. The same person who was sending him dreams must also be in cahoots with Ares. At this point, Ares had had enough and let a wild boar appear. But before he could attack, Percy sneakily stepped into the water and challenged Ares to fight himself. But by the look of it, Ares really wanted to fight Percy, but his words said otherwise, since gods couldn't directly fight demigods. The boar charged towards Percy, and he just barely managed to step out of the way and slice the boar with riptide. Right after that, Percy commanded a wave to swallow up the boar, and just like that, it was gone. He taunted Ares again, and this time the god took the bait and agreed to Percy's terms of fighting. If Ares wins, he could turn Percy into anything he wants and take the Master Bolt. But if Percy wins, he and his friends are safe from Ares and they could keep the helm and the bolt. Ares turned his baseball bat into a sword. Before they started to fight, Annabeth and Grover wished Percy luck and gave him some of their things for good luck. Annabeth gave him her camp necklace and Grover gave him his last tin can. Percy readied himself by taking a few steps back into the water as he remembered what Annabeth had said about Ares in Denver. Even strength has to bow to wisdom sometimes. As Ares took his first swing towards Percy, he missed since Percy's body moved for him. The water aided him to jump over Ares, and coming down he slashed, but was deflected by Ares' sword. As Ares forced Percy outside of the water and there was no opening for him to attack, Percy remembered what Luke had taught him in sword fighting lessons. Getting close when you got the shorter blade. Unfortunately, that didn't work too good. Ares was expecting this move, knocked away Riptide, and kicked Percy 30 feet across the beach. Out of nowhere, cops showed up to see what was going on there, and seemed to recognize Percy from the news. Percy still tried to get a hit in on Ares, but it seemed like he knew every move Percy was going to make. Ares didn't like the spectators they had attracted, so he just waved his hand and blew up the cop cars, letting the onlookers scramble away. While fighting, Percy managed to back more and more into the ocean, and as the waves were hitting his back, he had an idea. In his head, he imagined the waves getting smaller and smaller, and so they did in real life, but tension was building up. He waited for the perfect moment, and as Ares was about to deliver a devastating final blow, Percy released the tide and jumped out of the way. A 6-foot wave hit Ares full on, dragging him onto the beach, leaving him sputtering. Percy, losing no time, attacked again and managed to strike Ares' heel. From the wound, the golden blood of the gods, ichor, gushed out. Ares' face was full of disbelief that he had been bested by a simple demigod. He seemed to want to attack Percy again, but suddenly sound and color faded and it seemed like time had slowed down. The situation just landed a few moments, and after it passed, Ares lowered his sword and just threatened Percy, basically cursed him that in the moment he needed it most, his blade will betray him. The god started to glow and Percy looked away just in time as Ares revealed his true godly form and disappeared. The god was gone, but the helm stayed back. Percy picked it up and from the sky came the Furies. Percy explained to them what had happened, and they knew it was true since they had watched it happen from the sky. Percy gave them the helm and asked them to return it to Hades, and that he would also return his mother home. As Percy held up his end of the promise, Percy asked if his friends had also felt this weird sensation of time slowing down. They nodded. As a look passed between Percy and Annabeth, Percy knew what happened and the connection with the voice from the pit. They agreed that they had to get back to New York by that night, and the only way they could do that is to fly, which Percy was warned about never doing, or Zeus would strike him right out of the sky. In this case, it was their only hope of preventing World War III. My favorite quote from this chapter is something from Percy's head. It's, "My backpack was heavy with Zeus's master bolt. My heart was even heavier from seeing my mother." Very melancholic. My favorite scene is Annabeth giving Percy her necklace and saying, "Reconciliation, Athena and Poseidon together." And my favorite mythological reference is the true godly form. I only know one myth where it really played an impact, and that's the myth of Dionysus' birth. And some of my thoughts are when Ares explained how he turned the Master Bolt and his container sheath into Percy's backpack. I'm wondering what kind of container is the Master Bolt in? Because I think after that we never see it in a kind of container. Is it something just Ares had, or what? Also, speaking of Ares, it was described that he fights with a two-handed sword. I googled it and it looked nothing like what I was thinking. I was thinking some weird contraption with two handles, and it is actually exactly the thing he had in the TV show. Although I don't remember if he fought with two hands on it in the TV show. During writing down my script for this episode, I realized that I'm really bad at describing fighting. In other words, that they're described already. And I also love how Rick explained the advantages of ADHD in the setting of this fight. Chapter 21. I settle my tab. The mist is a powerful force. The news and people that were there were led to believe that the explosion that had happened was the result of a kidnapper shooting at a police car. This kidnapper, aka Ares, was supposedly the one who kidnapped Percy and two other kids, Grover and Annabeth, and all the times Percy got onto the news were escape attempts. The trio just ran with the story when they were questioned by the police and the news. This proves that Percy and his friends are great actors since they somehow convinced the police to get them onto a plane to New York. After arriving at the airport and dodging the reporters, they split up. Percy went to Olympus and he sent Grover and Annabeth back to camp to make sure that if anything happened to him, at least Chiron and the other campus would know what actually happened. Percy walked into the lobby of the Empire State Building. The man at the front desk was reading a book when Percy asked for the 600th floor. The man just told him that there was no such thing and continued reading. Percy, who was fed up and tired at this point, just showed him the Master Bolt. This seemed to motivate the guy, so he quickly handed over the keycard to the elevator. With the keycard, it was quite easy for Percy to get to Olympus. The view of Olympus took Percy's breath away. The home of the gods was in the clouds above the city of Manhattan. A narrow walkway connected the elevator to a city of buildings straight out of ancient Greece, but they were looking brand new. On his way up the mountain that was Olympus, nymphs and other beings were watching him, throwing olives at him, trying to sell him some ambrosia on a stick, and just ogling him. Percy made his way into the throne room of the gods. It was huge and ornate, 12 thrones arranged in the same shape as the cabins at camp, with a huge fire burning in the heart of the room. And in 2 of the thrones sat people. Percy immediately knew who these gods were: his father Poseidon and Zeus, king of the gods. He made his way to them and knelt in front of his father, which Zeus didn't seem to appreciate. Before any of the gods directly spoke to Percy, they started arguing about him, with Zeus even saying that he spared him when he dared to fly. Poseidon commanded Percy to look at them and tell his story. So that is what Percy did. He told them everything and laid the master bolt at Zeus's feet. After a deafening silence, Zeus took his bolt and admitted that he believed Percy's story, even if Ares didn't seem the type to do such things. This is where Percy told them about his suspicions that something older than the gods, locked in Tartarus, was behind this plot. The 2 gods eyed each other and had a quick discussion in ancient Greek, where Percy could only pick up one word: father. Quickly after this conversation, Zeus disappeared with a bunch of showmanship to purify his lightning bolt and left Percy and Poseidon alone. Percy asked his father what was in the pit, even though he already had his suspicions of it being Kronos. Poseidon gave Percy a bit of a backstory of the family drama, but also said that Zeus forbade further discussion on this matter. Poseidon became more human-sized as he talked to Percy. He told him that he had to go, but also that his mother had returned, confirming to Percy that Hades had held up his end of the deal. Percy wanted to ask his father if he would come with him to see Sally, but he hesitated. Poseidon prepared Percy for his return home, telling him that he had to make an important choice. He told Percy that his mother was a queen amongst women, and that he was very sorry for the life ahead of Percy, due to him being his father. The last thing Poseidon told Percy was that he is a true son of the sea god. On his way back through Olympus, the people were all silent and knelt for Percy. Down in Manhattan, Percy caught a taxi back to his home. It was his mother that opened the door, and they fell into each other's arms. She told him all about her return and that she didn't remember anything since the Minotaur attack. I can't even summarize how awful this next part is. Basically, what happened is Gabe sees that Percy has returned and wants to call the cops, but Sally interjects, which doesn't go over well. He even raises his hand, which makes Sally flinch, and at this point, Percy realizes that Gabe has been hitting his mom, or even worse. Percy couldn't really do something to help in this situation, even though he wanted to. Gabe told him off and made him a generous offer, as he would put it. Percy had 5 minutes to leave forever. After that, he would call the cops. Sally pulled Percy into his room to talk to him. She tried to assure Percy that everything would turn out okay, but Percy was being realistic when he said that nothing will work out as long as Gabe was there. Percy noticed a package on his bed, the very same package that he had sent to the gods, containing the head of Medusa. With this weapon on hand, Percy brought up the nerve to ask Sally right out if Gabe had been hitting her, and if she wanted him gone. Sally told Percy that it wasn't that easy, and that she had to do this herself. Percy was tempted to just take out Medusa's head and turn Gabe into stone, because that's what a hero would do. But he also questioned if he had the right to send someone to the underworld forever. Sally told Percy that he sounded so much like his father. He offered to stop the tide for me once. He offered to build me a palace at the bottom of the sea. He thought he could solve all my problems with the wave of his hand. Percy didn't seem to understand what was wrong with that. But Sally's next lines changed that. If my life is going to mean anything, I have to live it myself. Percy told his mom that he would leave the box for her if she ever got threatened again. He decided to go back to Camp Half-Blood, and on his way out, he saw something shift in Sally's demeanor as Gabe continued to verbally harass her. So my favorite quote is actually two parts of Poseidon's speech, more or less. The first one is, obedience doesn't come naturally to you, does it? And the second one is, the sea doesn't like to be restrained. My favorite scene is Percy describing Olympus, because it sounds amazing. And my favorite mythological reference is the hearth in the throne room of Olympus, aka Hestia's hearth, because she's the best goddess ever. But that's all I want to say about Hestia for now. I had a lot of thoughts on this chapter. The first sentence in this chapter is basically the same thing that Karen tells Percy as they were about to leave for the quest. He also mentions that in the chapter as well. I love that Percy was saying to the news reporters that Gabe would give a major appliance to everyone in LA, and then there were 500,000 phone calls to Gabe's store. It's just perfect revenge. I also love the fact that Percy isn't just not allowed to fly, but also doesn't like it when he has to. One thing that is iconic is Annabeth luring away the reporters at the New York airport. It's really, I forgot about this part before I reread it, but it's just amazing. Also, speaking of airport, I'm wondering, why did they need to go to baggage claim? Did they have to check in their backpacks? They don't have that much stuff. Or is it just on the way out? And that's why they met on that part. I don't fly that often, so I don't really know. Also, it says that Percy took a taxi from the airport to the Empire State Building in 30 minutes. Is that realistic? I know there are multiple airports around New York, so I don't know. I'm thinking, do I know the airports? I think I know 3 that are in/around New York. It's JFK, LaGuardia, and Newark, right? I think. Well, yeah, let's move on with other thoughts I had. Who is the guy in the lobby? Or what is he? Is he a demigod, a minor god, just a random mythical being? I did a bit of research and I found some supposed guards to Olympus, but they were 3 goddesses called the Horai. I have no idea how you say that. It's Greek, but there's not much known about them, or at least not much written about them. Then to Olympus, the Palace of Olympus and the Underworld being totally opposites is amazing. I always pictured it like differently, but also now having the visuals from the TV show is amazing and really helps with the details. Speaking of differences, also the difference of appearance between Zeus and Poseidon is iconic. One being this uptight businessman and the other being just a fisherman dude. Also, Zeus having to purify his lightning bolts in the waters of Lemnos is an interesting tidbit. I searched if I could find some things about Lemnos. Apart that it's an island in Greece, I couldn't find anything that directly connects these things, but there are a bunch of other myths that have to do with the island of Lemnos. Also, I love that Percy is a great friend, that he didn't take all the credit alone, but made sure that Zeus knew Annabeth and Grover had helped him. And here I have a list with 3 points of things Poseidon said in Percy's presence. There are things you should never say about your child. Number 1, I have admitted my wrongdoing. Number 2, I'm sorry you were born, child. And last but not least, number 3, it was an unforgivable mistake on my part. Yeah, not the best of fathers, right? And also, speaking of fathers, have I mentioned that I hate Gabe? He freaking sent Sally to work to make up 1 month's salary. I hate him so much. Now, to our last chapter of Percy Jackson and the Olympians, Book 1, The Lightning Thief. Chapter 22, The Prophecy Comes True. As Percy returned to camp, he and his friends got treated like the heroes they were, wearing laurel wreaths and having a feast thrown in their honor. At the end of the night, they got to burn the burial shrouds the other campers had made for them. Grover officially was granted a searcher's license by the Council of Cloven Elders. Percy moved back into cabin 3, not feeling as lonely as before. A week after Percy got to camp, a letter from his mom arrived. Gabe had mysteriously disappeared, And on totally unrelated news, Sally sold a life-size stone statue for enough money to move to a different apartment, pay for a semester at NYU, and put down a deposit for a new school for Percy if he wanted to return home for the school year. Every night he read that letter, contemplating on what to answer her. On July 4th, the camp gathered for a big celebration, but it also was the day that Grover came to Annabeth and Percy to say goodbye. Since he now had his searcher's license, he was going to find Pan. Percy was worried for Grover, as no satyr had ever returned from the search for Pan. But he also was convinced that if anyone would find Pan, it would sure be Grover. The summer at camp carried on, but Percy still had the prophecy in the back of his mind. He went through it line by line, over and over again, but the line about being betrayed by a friend still gave him pause. On the last night of summer, all the campers came together for dinner and a bonfire. There, the camp counselors awarded the campers with this year's bead, a black bead with a sea green trident, symbolizing Percy and his quest to the underworld. Percy never felt a sense of belonging like this before, but he was also sad since most of the campers would leave the following day. As Percy woke up the next morning, he found a letter informing him about the procedure to either get out by noon or stay for the whole year. The decision should have been easy for Percy, but he didn't want to leave his mother alone. He could have a whole year of hero training instead of school, but he also remembered a thing Annabeth told him. The real world is where the monsters are. That is where you learn if you're good or not. To clear his head, he decided to go to the arena to do a bit of sword practice. All the other campers were at their cabins getting ready to go home. At the arena, Percy saw Luke had the same idea as him, as he was slashing through dummies with a strange sword Percy had never seen before. As Luke noticed Percy, he stopped mid-swing, and Percy noticed that the sword was made out of two different types of metals. One half bronze, the other one steel. Luke explained that this new sword, Backbiter, worked both on mortals and immortals. Percy worried a bit as he remembered Chiron's words that a true hero should never harm innocent mortals. Luke sheathed his sword and invited Percy to join him in the forest to look for something to fight. Percy worried a bit that Luke would resent him for all the attention he had gotten, but ultimately agreed to join him. In the woods, they didn't find any monsters, so they found a nice spot near the creek and relaxed a bit. They got to talking about their quests, and Luke complained about how he never got to be a normal teenager. And after his failed quest, nothing had changed. Everyone was still the same, but he was not. He admitted to Percy that he was leaving and that he brought Percy here to say goodbye. Luke snapped his fingers and a scorpion, the size of Percy's hand, appeared by their feet. Percy's reflexes kicked in and he reached to his sword, but Luke warned him not to do so, since this was a pit scorpion and they are extremely fast when threatened. At first Percy was confused on what was happening, but then it hit him. The only line of the prophecy that did not make sense yet. The friend who will betray him was Luke. It was his shoes that almost dragged them down to Tartarus. He was the lightning thief and Cronus' accomplice. Percy tried to convince Luke that he was being brainwashed to aid Cronus, but he didn't listen. He explained how this quest was just a redo of something Heracles already did. While Luke was given his evil villain monologue, the scorpion was slowly climbing up Percy's leg. Percy tried to reason with Luke, and when that didn't help, he tried to bait him into fighting him directly instead of the scorpion, but that didn't work either. Luke slashed his sword through the air, creating some sort of portal and vanishing through it. The scorpion lunged, but Percy managed to slap it away and cut it in half with Riptide. He thought he was in the clear, but then he realized the red mark on his hand. The scorpion had managed to sting him. He felt dizzy and his vision started to blur. He made it to the creek in hopes that the water would heal him, but nothing seemed to happen. Percy somehow managed to get up and head towards camp. Some nymphs came from their trees and pulled him along before everything went dark. Percy woke up in the infirmary, bandaged up and being fed nectar by Annabeth. She and Chiron were watching over him, overjoyed that he was fine. Percy told them what had happened and what Luke had done. Chiron wanted to immediately head out to report this to the gods, and Percy wanted to go and find Luke, but Chiron wouldn't let him. He had to heal and also to make a choice on the coming year, if he would stay at camp or go back to live with his mom. Annabeth and Percy went outside and she confessed to Percy that she would try to go back home to her father. She pointed to the hill, and next to Talia's tree there were some people standing there, waiting for Annabeth. They promised each other that they would come back next year and hunt down Luke together. Annabeth left, and now Percy truly felt alone at camp for the first time. He looked out at the sea and remembered his father's words. So he made the decision to go home to his mom. Wow, what a book. But we still have some favorites to cover. My favorite quote, because it's also part of one of the best songs from the musicals, it's "I'll be back next summer, I'll survive till then." My favorite scene, of course, it's the betrayal scene between Luke and Percy, so that's easy. My favorite mythological reference, I actually already mentioned in a previous episode, the Garden of the Hesperides, so I'm talking about something different, which isn't actually mythological, but it's the pit scorpion, which is just a creature from Magic the Gathering, and here we can see that Rick is a nerd, and I love it. Some thoughts? I'm wondering how the Ares cabin found out what Percy did to their dad, or rather, why would they believe him? They probably would just deny that any of that happened when they told him, like, "No, you're lying, your father is great, no one can beat him in battle," things like that. Then July 4th fireworks. I would petition for them to be changed into a drone show to be good for the animals and the environment, and I'm pretty sure the Hephaestus cabin can figure something out. And I also love that Mr. D is still referring to Percy as Peter Johnson. I think that's my favorite name Mr. D gives Percy, so Peter Johnson. One sentence I can so connect with in this chapter is, "Deadlines just aren't real to me until they are staring me in the face." I currently have to write an end paper of my year abroad, and I am leaving in 3 weeks. Actually, when this comes out in 2 weeks, and I hope I have at least started to write it. And the thing is, I have to write it in 2 languages, German and English. I'm just gonna write it in 1 language and then just translate it. So that would be the easiest part. Also, the name of Luke's sword, Backbiter, is both a perfect and a horrible name for that specific sword. It's perfect for this specific one, but in general it's a bad name for a sword. Now, in general, for these 3 chapters, the best character is Percy because he is the main character. The best chapter overall is, I think, the prophecy comes true, because we have the big twist at the end and a good setup for the next book. And the best chapter title is "I Battle My Jerk Relative." And I also have a fun fact about this book. While I was researching, I found on the Riordan fan wiki that apparently there was supposed to be another chapter in this book. It's a deleted chapter, which was called "I Kiss Something Ugly." I would love to know at what part this is and what Percy had to kiss. Trivia Trials. Now we have trivia. The answers from last episode. The first question was, when were the first ever Kids' Choice Awards held? They were held on March 28th, 1987. The second question was, what is elevator music called? It's called Muzak. Now to today's question, I have another date question. When was the inaugural San Diego Comic-Con held? And back then it had a different name, so you can also try to guess the name. And the next question is, how is the statue of Gabe, aka the poker player, described? What art style? Mythical music. I have to go with the elevator music Percy describes, so it's gonna be "Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head" by B.J. Thomas. Before I head out, I wanted to thank some very special people. They made my time here in Poland unforgettable. Katarina, Noran, and Julia for being amazing flatmates these past few months and putting up with me even if I recorded the podcast in the middle of the night. Mariam for being my first friend that was this into the Percy Jackson universe as I am. Julia for making me show Hamilton to all of our friends and getting me to come to trivia with the only objective to beat Tristan. Elena, Camila, Masha, Katarina, Gwen, Alp, Belen, Emre, Chiara, Enrica, and all of the other volunteers and new friends I made along the way. Most of all, thank you to my Polish cosplay trio, Roderick for being the biggest Octavian stan and the fact that we can laugh about random German memes together, Sony for camping with me at Pircon, being the Luz to my Amity, and loving the same musicals I do, and Michael, my epic bestie, the person I can obsess over every tiniest detail in any song with. I'll miss you all so much, and you know who to call when you want to come to Austria. I love you all so much. Bye-bye. And that concludes another adventure with Delphi Dispatches. Thank you, Demigods, for joining me on today's quest. Please consider subscribing to the podcast. And if you want to connect with me on Instagram, just follow at Delphi_Dispatches_pod for updates on the fun community. This is Martina, signing off until next time, and remember, the real world is where the monsters are.